The index.php file is the first file we've come to that's absolutely required by WordPress. If this file doesn't exist, WordPress doesn't see your theme as an actual theme, unless it's a child theme. The index.php is also the fallback template for every other content-producing template in the theme. By content-producing, I mean templates that serve dynamic content from the database, as opposed to mostly static content like the sidebar, header, and footer. If any template file doesn't exist, WordPress falls back to the index.php, so it better be prepared to handle everything. If I'm on a tag archive page listing all the posts filed under the cats, and there's no tag.php or archive.php, WordPress is going to try to use index.php to display those posts. Likewise, if I'm looking at a page and there's no page.php, WordPress is going to use index.php to try to display that too. The main component of any index.php file and any template that's dealing with displaying content is the WordPress loop, which looks like this: if have posts, while have posts, the post. WordPress was written so that the functions can be read semantically. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to try to figure out what's going on here. If we have any posts, and while there are still posts, do the post stuff. What the post actually does is prepare the loop's query objects so that other functions can be run, like the title or the permalink. If you don't start off your loop with the post, you'd have to use the post variable to grab things like post titles, permalinks to the post thumbnail, and everything else. The loop works its magic by using URL query strings that are usually hidden when the permalink settings have been edited. The base permalink structure is like this: mydomain.com $p equals 123. With the $p equals 123, the loop knows to run its query only on posts with an ID of 123. Then it runs its check. Does a post with ID 123 exist? Okay, if it does, as long as I have a post, in this case 1 with an ID of 123, do the post. This works the same for tag and category archives as well. A category archive page would have a similar query string, $cat equals apples. Now when we're running the loop, it looks at that and says, do we have any posts in the apples category? Okay, then as long as there are still posts in the apple category, do the post stuff. Outside of the loop, you'll want to use whatever wrapper divs you want to use for styling things. Inside the loop will be any markup and containers that will be wrapped around the post content. The function to display the post content when the loop ends with the post is the content. Your index.php template will probably want to call in functions used for the static areas of the WordPress theme: getHeader to pull on the header.php, getSidebar to pull on the sidebar.php, and getFooter to pull on the footer.php. Each of these functions accept a parameter to define a specific header, sidebar, and footer, in case you have different ones. For example, if you had a separate mobile header, you could call that in like this: getHeaderMobile. This would look for a header-mobile.php file in the theme. If none was found, it wouldn't load any header at all. Your theme doesn't need to have a sidebar.php, so you don't need to run getSidebar if you don't have a sidebar, but you'll probably want to have a header.php and a footer.php, and therefore run getHeader and getFooter in your index.php and on any other template that runs the loop. By design, the index.php in Museum Core is pretty skeletal. First, I get the header and run a theme hook alliance before content hook. The AP Core getWhich_content function checks the options for which side the sidebar should be on and returns the appropriate class based on where the content should be in relation to the sidebar. Then I start my content wrapper and run the loop. What? Nothing inside the loop? What's going on there? Inside the loop, I'm making use of the WordPress function getTemplatePart. This is a handy function that can be used to split up your templates into smaller files. The immediate benefit here is that if I have a particular bit of code that I use over and over, I can put it into a template part and load it into a template using getTemplatePart. Alternately, if I wanted to display things differently, like I am here, where I do a check for the post format and load a template part based on that post format, I can create specific template parts that are just for that post format. So if I'm displaying an aside post, aside becomes a post format that is returned by getPostFormat, and so the getTemplate part looks for a file in the parts directory named post-aside.php. If I'm working with a normal post, no post format is returned at all, so getTemplate part looks for a file named post.php in the parts directory. I'm also using getTemplate part to load the navigation part. Here, getTemplate part knows to look for a file named partNavigation.php in the parts directory. I'm pulling in the navigation template part after the while loop because I don't want it to display on every single post, but before the end if because I don't want to display the navigation if no posts exist. Finally, after closing my content wrapper, I load the sidebar and the footer. Let's take a look inside the two template parts used in index.php to get an idea of how template parts can be used. I'll start with post.php. Post.php starts with an article HTML5 tag and the post class function, which loads a bunch of default classes that get added by WordPress when post class is used. These classes are things like post format, post ID, and other stuff that can be used by theme and plugin developers to style posts. It's recommended, but not required. Then I'll load yet another template part, this time dealing with the title. This file is also in the parts directory, and it's named partTitle.php. Notice how I still need to define the directory, even though the template part we're looking at is also in that directory. This is because getTemplate part uses the style sheet directory, which should be the root directory for the theme, as the base for the directory structure. It doesn't use a relative path. In the title template part, I need to do a check if a title exists. A post can have no post title, but if it does, and you aren't checking for it, it could break some formatting or display an empty H tag, which is awkward. If no title exists, I'm going to display no title, because it's better than nothing at all. This also means that the no title is still able to be linked and clicked on. For folks hoping to write themes to be released in the WordPress.org repository, you'll need to do something like this to pass the theme review process. You can't publish a theme on WordPress.org if there's a possibility that you aren't able to get to the single post page of a particular post, which would be the case if you had an empty H tag with a link wrapped around no content, in the case of a post without a title. Otherwise, the title exists, and we display the title with a link to the single post page for that post. Here's where you can see some of those post-specific template tags like the permalink, the title, and the time, none of which could be used if you weren't using the post in your WordPress loop. I should point out that you can't use the post in any scenario. It can only be used in the loop. If you need to set up the post data so you can use those template tags outside the loop, for example, if you're using a function called getPosts, you can do this with setup post data. Okay, now we've got our title, so let's go back to post.php. We're on to the actual post entry, which is separated by a section. Here I've got another similar function to AP core get which content, except this time the setting I'm checking is whether we're using excerpts or full posts. If we are showing full posts, AP core blog excerpt will return false, and I display the full post content. Otherwise, it returns true, and we then look for a post thumbnail and display the post excerpt. After dealing with the post stuff, I will load another template part. This one handles the link pages function. In WordPress, WP link pages handles posts and pages that are internally paginated, meaning that you display some part of the post, then have a link to proceed to the next page in that article. In my theme, I built a function that works similarly to the WP link pages function. It's called AP core link pages. The difference between AP core link pages and WP link pages is that I've added a few extra parameters, which I've mostly done here to support the way Bootstrap handles pagination. The existing WP link pages didn't give me all the options I wanted, so I built my own function that did the same thing with a few more parameters. But because WordPress.org requires WP link pages support, I've wrapped my AP core link pages function in a wrapper checking to make sure the function exists and falling back to WP link pages in case it doesn't. Now back to the post. I've handled multi-page posts if this post has more than one page. So I close out my content area, the section tag, and now I'm pulling in a template part that handles how to display post meta information like category and tags. This time, getTemplatePart is looking for a file in the parts directory called part.postmetadata.php. Let's look at that. Here I've got a new section. I pull my options into a variable. Then I define some variables dealing with the time, categories, tags, and author. If in the options I've said that I want to display author information, and if I'm on a single post, my post meta will look like this, posted in these categories at this time with these tags by this author. If it's not a post, but it's a chat, and I'm displaying author information, it will be displayed like this, filed under this category with these tags by this author. And so on for image posts and galleries with post authors or not. Below this information is a link that jumps to the comments section that displays the number of comments on the post, and then an edit link for the post. Then we're done with our post metadata template part. Dropping back to the post.php template, all that's left is to close out the article tag. Then we drop into the parent template. In this case, we've come from index.php. Your theme doesn't need to be this complex. But then, we're building a theme framework, so you'll probably want to include some tricks like this that will ultimately make your theme more robust. Using template parts is a great way to both simplify your code and practice dry coding. The index.php needs to be able to support everything, not just posts and pages, but any type of content, including post types that don't exist yet or have been added from third-party plugins. For that reason, you want to make sure that it's the most flexible template in your theme so it can accommodate any type of content.